I was halfway through reviewing a client's brand pitch when my phone buzzed. I glanced down expecting a meeting reminder or a meme from Mia. Instead, I saw my mother's name. "We changed the locks. You don't have a home anymore." Just like that. No punctuation beyond the period. No explanation. No warning. Just finality. My fingers froze above my keyboard. I stared at the screen as if reading it a second longer might change the meaning. Then I did what I always did when my mother delivered a blow. I acted unfazed. I typed back, "How funny how brave you think you are." Haha. But the moment I hit send, my hands trembled. I pushed away from my laptop, unable to breathe. The house. My house. She was talking about the home that legally belonged to me. The one my grandmother Edith left me in her will. It wasn't supposed to end like this. After Grandma passed last year, I remember sitting in the stuffy office of Reed and Altman with my parents and younger brother Nico. My mother wore a pearl brooch and tight smile. My father his pressed blazer and permanent impatience. I was still in a fog of grief. The lawyer cleared his throat and read the will. Most of it was standard donations to charities, a few personal items to friends. But then came the line, "I leave my home located at 1140 Hawthorne Street in full to my granddaughter Calla Whitmore." Silence fell like a dropped pane of glass. My mother blinked. My father leaned forward as if he'd misheard. "Excuse me," my mother said, voice clipped. "That house is part of the estate. She didn't mean to exclude us." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Whitmore, your mother was of sound mind. The will is notarized and witnessed. She specified Calla as the sole heir to the property." My father's jaw tightened. Nico shifted awkwardly in his seat. I remember my heart thudding not from joy, but from shock. That house was the heartbeat of our family. Holidays, birthdays, burned sugar cookies in December. Grandma's porch swings, her cinnamon-scented scarves. Afterward, I tried to be gentle. Over coffee the next morning, I told my parents, "Nothing has to change. I want to keep the house the way Grandma intended, but I'm not shutting you out." My mother stirred her coffee like she was punishing it. "We just didn't expect this," she said. "I'm not trying to take anything from you," I replied. "I just want to honor her memory." I believed that would be enough. Now, staring at the text, I knew better. I grabbed my coat and keys, heart thumping, and walked out the office door without bothering to explain. Whatever came next, this wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the war they had just declared and the silence that came before it. Before it was a legal battleground, before it became the object of family war, the house was sanctuary. Grandma Edith's Victorian sat quietly at the corner of Hawthorne and 17th, wrapped in wisteria vines and memories. I used to joke that the porch had better stories than most people because it had held everything from birthday laughter to whispered heartbreak. I learned how to make sugar cookies in that yellow-tiled kitchen. I cried over my first breakup in the sunroom while Grandma handed me tea in a mug that said, "You are not too much." I wrote my college admissions essay in the bay window seat overlooking the garden she never let go wild. To me, that house didn't just contain our history, it was our history. My parents never saw it that way. After the will was read, their disappointment barely stayed beneath the surface. My mother Verena kept saying Grandma hadn't been thinking clearly. My father Dale kept reminding me of how much money the house was worth. Nico, my brother, said very little. That's how he's always been neutral, quiet, floating somewhere between keeping the peace and avoiding it. "You're lucky," he said once after the reading. "It's a big responsibility, though. That house needs work." "I know," I said, "but I'm not selling it. I want to keep it as it was." Grandma would have hated seeing it gutted and flipped. And I meant it. I wasn't interested in turning it into a modern shell of itself. I wanted to preserve what mattered: the stained glass, the creaky floorboards that knew my steps, the rose-printed wallpaper in the hallway that hadn't changed since the 60s. I had no plans to change the soul of the house just to patch the plumbing fix. The windows give the roof what it needed to breathe another 50 years. The trouble started with the paint. I'd carefully selected a soft sage green for the dining room, something that honored the light in that space but refreshed it a little. My mom came by while the painter was halfway through. She didn't even say hello. "Your grandmother kept that wallpaper for 40 years, she said flatly. running her hand along the edge where the paper had been peeled back. It was peeling, I told her. The humidity got to it. She loved that pattern, she muttered, eyes darting over the walls like they betrayed her personally. I know. I kept a full panel. I'm going to frame it in the hallway. So it's still here. She didn't respond, just stood there, arms crossed, like the room itself offended her. That was how it went. Every change I made, even the smallest ones, felt like a personal insult to her. She saw me not as a caretaker, but as a thief, chipping away at what she believed belonged to her. Still, I tried. I invited them to Sunday dinners. I gave updates on the restorations. Nico showed up sometimes. Dad came once. Verena came often, but never kindly. She'd stand in the entryway with her mouth tight, scanning every detail. She didn't come to connect. She came to keep score. And I foolishly still believed if I played it right, I wouldn't have to choose between the house and my family. When I landed back in Portland, I was exhausted, but proud. The pitch had gone better than I'd hoped. Our team secured the contract, and I'd even been asked to lead the rollout campaign. I texted Mia from the airport, "I'm going to sleep for 2 days straight." She replied with a laughing emoji and, "You earned it, Queen." I took a lift straight from the terminal to Hawthorne Street. My suitcase bumped behind me as I walked up the steps, craving the familiar creak under my feet, the worn welcome mat Grandma never replaced. I reached for my keys, already thinking about reheating soup and crawling into bed. The key didn't fit. At first, I thought I was just tired, maybe twisting it wrong. I tried again, and again. Then I noticed the deadbolt. It was new. Polished. Wrong. My chest went tight. I called my mom. No answer. I tried my dad. Voicemail. My heart started to pound. That's when the text came. "We changed the locks. You don't have a home anymore. This house belongs to the family, not just you." I didn't cry. Not yet. I stood on the porch with my suitcase beside me like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. My fingers fumbled for Nico's number. "Did you know about this?" I asked the moment he answered. "Know about what they changed the locks on Grandma's house?" "My house." There was a pause. "Oh, Calla, I'm sorry. I didn't know they were going to do that. Where are they?" "They went to the coast for the weekend." My voice broke finally. "Can you let me in? You have a key, don't you?" Another pause. "I don't. And even if I did, I can't get in the middle of this." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I ended the call and sat down on the porch steps, my legs suddenly too heavy. That's when I saw them. 3 black trash bags shoved beneath the hydrangeas, my name written in Sharpie on masking tape, inside clothes crumpled in piles, toiletries in plastic bags, books, old photographs, a cracked snow globe from my childhood. I opened one bag and found Grandma's apron balled up like trash. But the jewelry box wasn't there. Neither was the leather-bound journal she kept about the house, the one with decades of notes in her handwriting. My birth certificate, passport, all gone. They hadn't just thrown me out. They'd kept what mattered. I called Mia. My voice barely worked. "I'll be there in 10, she said. When she arrived, we loaded everything into her trunk. She didn't ask questions, just drove. That night, I lay on her lumpy pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed every Sunday dinner, every polite nod, every time I'd told myself they'll come around. They hadn't come around. They'd come for blood. Mia brought me tea, and I held the mug with both hands, trying to steady myself. "They can't do this," she whispered. I didn't respond, not because I disagreed, because I knew they already had. By Monday morning, I couldn't pretend this would resolve itself. Mia left a sticky note on the counter. "You've been quiet long enough. Now you fight." I spent the afternoon researching attorneys, my stomach tight with nerves. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, just someone who knew the law better than my family knew how to twist it. Sophia Reyes returned my email within the hour. Her voice on the phone was calm, deliberate. When I explained the situation, she didn't hesitate. "That's called self-help eviction," she said. "And it's illegal even if they thought they had a claim, which they don't. You have the deed and the will correct." "Yes," I said. "The original will is missing, but I have the copy the estate lawyer sent after the reading." That'll do for now. We'll request the certified copy from probate. In the meantime, let's schedule an emergency injunction. Her confidence steadied me. For the first time in days, I felt like maybe I wasn't crazy for being hurt. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't weak. I was just wronged. Sophia gave me a checklist document. Everything: make a list of missing items, record any communication from my parents or Nico. She told me not to contact them directly. From this point forward, everything goes through me. But I didn't need to reach out. My mother had already started. That night, I got a notification. She'd posted a public message on Facebook, a sepia-toned photo of Grandma Edith's house captioned, "Some people forget where they came from." My mother built a legacy, and now it's being turned into a business against everything she stood for. I'm heartbroken. The comments came fast. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years chimed in with shock and sympathy. "You're such a good daughter," one wrote. "I can't believe she'd do that. Another greed makes people do awful things." I didn't know whether to scream or sob. "She's controlling the story I told Mia." "No," Mia said, jaw tight. "She's manipulating it. There's a difference." Then came the voicemail. My dad. His voice sounded like gravel. "You've made a mistake, Calla. A big one. Getting lawyers involved?" "That's low. Your mother is devastated. If you think the family will stand by while you disgrace Edith's legacy, you're wrong. Drop this. Or regret it." I played it twice. The second time, I sat on Mia's kitchen floor back against the cabinet and finally let myself cry. Not because I was afraid, but because it confirmed what I hadn't wanted to believe. This wasn't about misunderstanding. It wasn't grief. It wasn't tension that time would smooth out. It was war. And they were willing to burn everything, me included, to win it. I forwarded the voicemail to Sophia. She responded 2 minutes later. "Let them talk. We're not backing down." And just like that, I knew I wouldn't either. The email's subject line read, "From Florence," about Edith. I stared at it for almost a full minute before opening it. "Calla, you don't know me well. I'm your grandmother's sister. We haven't spoken in years, but I believe there are things you need to see. Your grandmother asked me to hold on to them in case something like this happened. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. Florence Whitmore." I remembered Florence from scattered childhood holidays. She and my mother barely spoke. I'd always assumed it was some old grudge, the kind that fossilizes over time. Now, I wondered if it had always been about the house. We met at her home just outside Eugene. She lived in a modest bungalow with faded hydrangeas and furniture that smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. Florence didn't ask about my parents. She simply said, "Your grandmother trusted you in a way she couldn't trust anyone else." Then she opened a drawer and handed me a manila envelope. Inside were 3 things: printed emails my parents corresponding with a real estate developer months before Grandma passed. They'd been negotiating a deal to sell the property complete with demolition plans and projected condo layouts. A handwritten letter in Grandma's unmistakable looping cursive. "Calla, if you're reading this, I've passed. I know what they'll try to say. I've seen it coming for years." And finally, a USB drive. Florence played it for me on her desktop computer. I heard my grandmother's voice, steady, unwavering. "This is Edith Whitmore. I am of sound mind and body. I am making this recording because I believe my daughter Verena and son-in-law Dale may attempt to contest my will. My decision to leave my home to my granddaughter Calla is made freely and with full understanding. She is the one who sees its soul." I didn't realize I was crying until Florence handed me a tissue. "She knew," I whispered. "She saw all of it coming." "She did," Florence said. "And she made sure you'd have what you needed when the time came." Back in Portland, I delivered everything to Sophia. She read, listened, scanned, and then looked up at me with something close to fire in her eyes. "This changes everything." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not because things were fixed, but because I finally had something stronger than fear. I had her voice, and it was loud enough to carry us both. The courthouse was gray and cold and humming with quiet tension. Sophia had prepped me for everything: what to wear, how to sit, when to speak, when not to. "Let your paperwork do the shouting," she said with a half-smile. My parents were already seated when we entered. My mother didn't look at me. My father did, and there was nothing in his stare but disdain. Nico sat behind them, his hands clenched, his eyes flicking between us like he didn't want to be there. The hearing moved quickly. Sophia presented the will, the certified deed, the emails, and finally the USB recording. The judge listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When it ended, the room felt different, like someone had cracked a window open in a place that had long gone stale. My parents' lawyer tried to argue abandonment, that I had left the property unattended, that they were simply securing family assets. But the judge cut him off. Miss Whitmore is the legal owner. Whether her parents agree with her grandmother's decision is not relevant. They had legal recourse if they wished to challenge the will. Changing locks and removing belongings is not one of them. My mother's lip quivered. My father's jaw twitched. The judge signed the injunction. They are to return full access to Miss Whitmore immediately. If any items are missing or damaged, this court will pursue further consequences. We stepped into the hallway and Sophia exhaled. That went better than expected. I nodded numb but grateful until a uniformed officer stepped forward. "Calla Whitmore." "Yes. I need to ask you a few questions about a theft report filed by Margaret and Dale Whitmore alleging you removed heirlooms and legal documents without permission." The hallway blurred. I felt the eyes of strangers, the prickle of judgment. Sophia stepped in fast. "My client is not speaking further without a formal statement or legal summons. She is the owner of the property in question and the heir to the disputed items." The officer nodded reluctantly and stepped back, but the damage was done. Jason lingered behind the others, staring at the floor. "You knew they did this?" I asked quietly. He looked up, eyes full of something like shame. "I didn't know about the police report, but you knew they were willing to lie." He didn't answer. I didn't push. Back at Sophia's office, I sank into the chair across from her desk. "They're never going to stop, are they?" She looked me straight in the eye. "That's why we don't either." And that's when I knew this wasn't just defense anymore. It was time to go on the offensive. The house was quiet when I returned, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. Most of the furniture was still there, but everything personal had been stripped. The walls where Grandma's photos once hung were bare, faint outlines left behind like shadows that didn't want to let go. Her copper pans were gone. The rocking chair she read in every night had disappeared. In the journal, her handwritten record of the home, its quirks, its stories, was nowhere. Sophia filed a theft report for the missing items, but even if we got some of it back, I knew parts of this house had been stolen in a way I couldn't ever fully recover. Still, I moved forward. I repainted the entryway. I hung new curtains. I opened the windows wide and let the spring air carry the dust and ghosts out into the yard. Then I turned the front parlor into what I had always imagined, a small gallery space for local artists centered on themes of home memory and reclamation. Opening night came faster than expected. Mia brought wine, and a few neighbors who had once looked at me with suspicion now stood inside admiring the art and chatting warmly. It wasn't packed, but it was full enough to feel alive. Jason showed up just before closing. He held out a small, worn envelope. "Found this in one of Dad's old photo albums," he said. "Thought you should have it." Inside was a photo of Grandma Edith on the front porch, laughing in mid-motion. The way I remembered her sunlight in her hair apron still tied defiant joy in her smile. "Thank you," I said. "And I meant it." He nodded. "You're doing something good here." I was still holding the photo when I saw her Verena, standing just inside the door alone. She looked smaller somehow, older. Her eyes moved slowly around the room, taking in the walls, the crowd, the space she once tried to erase. When she reached me, she didn't offer a hug or a smile. Just one sentence. "Your grandmother would have approved." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't an attack either. I nodded, tucking the photo into my pocket. "I know." She turned and walked out without another word. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't need one. 1 year later, the house no longer felt like a battlefield. It had become a living thing again. Walls breathing with stories, light spilling into rooms where silence once festered. The gallery had found its rhythm, hosting small exhibits every few months, each one rooted in truth transformation and the quiet beauty of survival. At work, I was promoted to creative director, not because I'd been through hell and made it back, but because I'd shown up consistently, clearly, and with something to say. The experience hadn't broken me, it had sharpened me. Jason and I met for coffee most weeks now. There was no grand reconciliation, but the effort was mutual. He didn't try to explain away the past. He just kept showing up. Sometimes that's enough. As for my parents, we existed at a careful distance. There were no more lawsuits, no more voicemails, just space and peace. Sometimes the absence of conflict feels like grace. One evening, I sat in the study, Grandma's study, with a cup of tea and the soft hum of the house around me. On the wall above her desk hung a framed quote she used to keep folded in her wallet. "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." Maya Angelou. I stared at it for a long time, then opened my journal and wrote, "They tried to lock me out of a house. I built something no one can evict me from. This home, this life was mine now. Not just by law, but by love, by labor, by choice. And if anyone else out there has been betrayed by the ones who should have protected you, know this: you're not alone. You can still build something stronger. Starting now."